I'm looking today at a strategy that I found in this video from Traders Landing. I will leave a link in the description to the original video where Traders Landing describes the strategy and also goes through a test of the results. This strategy uses the Pivot Point Supertrend, which I created in two earlier videos, one for MetaTrader 4 and one for MetaTrader 5, because you'll need that indicator and it doesn't come naturally with MetaTrader. If you haven't seen those videos, I'll also leave a link to both the MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5 versions of that indicator. If you don't have the indicator and you would like to obtain a copy so that you can at least build this expert, then I'll also leave a link where you can download a compiled version of the Pivot Point Supertrend for MetaTrader. Before I go too much further, after I released the videos on the Pivot Point Supertrend, I've had a number of people tell me that there have been differences in the results from the MetaTrader version and the TradingView version. I have checked the code many times and I cannot find a fault. That doesn't mean there isn't one, I simply cannot find it. And all of the differences that I can find come down to a difference in the prices between the MetaTrader feed and the feed used by TradingView. The indicator itself uses ATR extensively, and I'm finding that there is a difference in the ATR on MetaTrader and TradingView, and that difference can be attributed to differences in the high and low prices from the two feeds. So they will create differences in the results. But as far as I know, the indicators are working correctly on MetaTrader. If you do happen to find in the earlier videos a coding error, then please let me know and I'll do my best to correct it. But at the moment, I believe that the code is correct and matches what is being written in TradingView. I also mentioned in the earlier video, I pointed out that I think there is a fault in the TradingView indicator. I'm not certain of it because it may be by design, but I showed how to write the indicator with or without what I perceived as the fault. The download that I have available has that possible fault included, so it more closely matches the TradingView indicator. And it's a fault that only means that the value of the support and the resistance lines at the beginning of a switch, after you change from support to resistance or resistance to support, those values are different. But the places where those changes happen aren't affected, although they may be different if you have different high and low prices in your feeds, as I mentioned a minute ago. I've had some feedback that when I create videos that incorporate both MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5, it can get confusing as I switch between the two. So I'm actually producing two separate videos here, one for MetaTrader 4 and one for MetaTrader 5, and each one will cover the complete expert advisor for the MetaTrader 4 or the MetaTrader 5 version. This video is for MetaTrader 5. I will be releasing a video for MetaTrader 4 very soon, and when I do, I'll add a link to the MetaTrader 4 video in the description for this video. I want to also mention that Traders Landing talks about some possible improvements to the strategy. I haven't included any of those improvements in the code that I'm creating here today, and that's for two reasons. Some of those improvements are not extremely well defined, and given that they were just suggestions, I didn't want to incorporate them in this code. But also, the number of combinations of those suggestions that I would have to cover would have made this too confusing and too lengthy. So I have stuck to the original strategy as I understand it from the Traders Landing video. There are a couple of points where I've noted in the video here that his description doesn't necessarily match the examples shown, and where I've made some assumptions, so I've pointed those out as we go through the rest of the video. And before we get into the code, let me ask you, please click the like button and click subscribe. That helps us enormously. It gets us up the YouTube rankings and helps people to find our videos. So now let's get straight into the code and see how this works. I'm in the MetaTrader 5 editor. I've used the wizard to create the outline of the MQ5 file, and I've then just tidied up the comments and the structure a little bit. So here are my comments. This is the strategy from Traders Landing, and here are the basic rules for the strategy. The property statements were inserted by the wizard, the copyright, link, and version number. And then I'll be using the onInit, onDinit, and onTick functions. Depending on the options you've chosen in the wizard, you may have additional functions or you may be missing some of these. If you're missing some, don't worry, you can just type them in. If you have extras, then you can either delete them or just leave them there. Now this strategy uses the Pivot Point Supertrend indicator that we created in the earlier videos, so I need to be able to load that as an iCustom indicator. So I'm just going to put some definitions here at the beginning of the code. So here I have a defined statement, PPS indicator path, and that has the full path indicators orchard PPS Pivot Point Supertrend.ex5, full path to the indicator, a resource statement, hash resource, backslash, so 2 backslashes are a single backslash because a backslash is an escape character, plus the PPS indicator path, and then another defined PPS indicator, and here I put double colon plus the indicator path. If you're wondering why I'm doing this instead of simply using the path name in the iCustom function, then I have an earlier video that explains that, and I'll leave a link on screen and in the description to that earlier video. If you have seen the earlier videos where I created this Pivot Point Supertrend indicator, you'll note that I originally had this in a folder called Pivot Point Supertrend, and here I'm using a folder called PPS. That's because this resource statement can only accept strings up to 63 characters, and the full name with Pivot Point Supertrend as this folder name was too long, so I've just shortened the folder name and renamed the folder, of course, to match that. Next, I'm going to add inputs for the values of the 2 exponential moving average indicators and the Supertrend indicator. I don't like to just write the code for the strategies and use the default settings for those. I like to give you the option to change those in the inputs. So just the 3 inputs for the confirmation moving average first, the number of bars, the method, and the applied price, and these are defaults to 200 EMA and close price. Then for the stop loss, the defaults are 50 bars EMA closing price, and then the Supertrend inputs, number of pivot point bars 2, ATR factor of 3, and the ATR bars of 10. And then some standard inputs that I need just to place the trades. I need a magic number, a trade comment, and a volume. So these trades will all be placed with a fixed volume, which I'm defaulting to 0.01. For those 3 indicators, I'm going to need a handle to the indicator, and I'm also going to need a double buffer that I can use to retrieve values from these indicators. So I just declare some variables here: handle to the confirmation indicator, handle to the SL, handle to the Supertrend, and a double indicator buffer that I can use to grab the values from each of those. I also want to track if I have a trade open and what type that trade is. So I'm declaring a variable here, enum position type, and I'm just calling that current trade. And then to make the actual trade management and trade entry easier, I'm going to use some include files that are supplied with MetaTrader 5 that create classes for trade and position information. So I've got the hash include trade/trade.mqh that brings in the trade class file, and that includes a number of other files. So then I have access to the ctrade class and the cPositionInfo class. So I've declared a variable of type ctrade, I've just called that trade, and of type cPositionInfo, and I've just called that positionInfo. Now moving into onInit, the first thing I'm going to do is initialize current trade. I could have done it here, I could have simply said current trade equals -1, but I prefer to do that in the initialization function. And now I'm going to create handles to each of the 3 indicators that are needed. So using those global variables from earlier, the handle confirmation, handle SL, and handle Supertrend, I'm just calling the IMA function for the symbol, period, confirmation bars, 0 for the shift, the confirmation method, and the applied price. I'm doing the same then for the SL, using the SL bars, SL method, and SL applied price. And then handle Supertrend, this is where I use iCustom, symbol, period, and the PPS indicator here, that's the macro that we defined here. And by including that double colon, that actually tells the iCustom that I'm loading a resource and not a direct file name. So the indicator and then the three arguments to that custom indicator, the PP bars factor, or the ATR factor, and the ATR bars. So that gives me the three handles to the indicators that I need. And now I need to check that I created each of those handles successfully. So I just got one statement here to test that. If handle confirmation or SL or supertrend equal invalid handle, then I know that I failed to create one of these, and I'm just printing a message, failed to create an indicator handle, and return init failed. And then just two more statements to get everything set up. Indicator buffer is where I'm going to be retrieving values from these handles, and I want to make sure that the values align with the bar numbers on screen so that indicator buffer 0 will match the value for bar number 0. And I can do that by using array set as series, indicator buffer, true. If I don't do that, then the values for indicator buffer, the indicator buffer 0 will be the bar to the leftmost of the screen, or leftmost of the chart. And rather than worry about the math of organizing that each time I use it, I just use array set as series, and then the values of the elements of indicator buffer will line up with the bar numbers. Then the other thing, the trade object that I've created, I use trade.setExpertMagicNumber of the input magic value. And that one time sets up the magic number so that when I use the trade object later to open new trades, it will just use that magic number. There is no option on the statements later to create trades where I can input a magic number. So I must do it through this setExpertMagicNumber statement. And now because I've created those handles to indicators, I need to remove those when this expert terminates so that I free up the resources. And that's just calling indicator release for the confirmation, the SL, and the supertrend handles. And now most of the work's going to happen when the onTick function is called. So first I'm declaring this static double SL equals 0. So this is my stop loss value, and I'm initializing it to 0 on the first call to onTick, and after that it will have the value that it had last time we called the function. I'm declaring a variable called newBar, and I'm getting the value of that from the isNewBar function, which we'll see in a moment, but this simply tells me that a new bar has been formed. If I have a new bar or the stop loss is currently 0, then I call these statements. If the copy buffer, and then I pass in the handle to the stop loss, the buffer number that I want to retrieve, and the stop loss is a moving average, it only has one buffer, number 0, start position, bar number 0, number of values that I want to return, 2, so I'm returning bars 0 and 1, and I'm putting the values into indicator buffer. Copy buffer returns the number of values that were retrieved. If that's less than 2, then I don't get enough values back, and I simply print this error message, not enough SL results returned, and then I return. So if for some reason the copy buffer fails, I'll return at this point, and then it will come back into this statement at the next onTick. If I get down to this point, then I've managed to call the copy buffer successfully, indicator buffer has the values, and I simply get the value for bar number 1 by saying double SL equals, I don't need that double because it's already declared, by saying SL equals indicator buffer 1, and that gets the value for the stop loss from bar number 1. I'll just create this isNewBar function, I'll put that at the end. I use this function or something very similar quite a lot. You may have seen it before. Static variable date time called previous time. I'm initializing that to 0, and because it's static, next time this function is called, it will have the same value it had the last time this function exited. And then another date time, current time, and that's iTime symbol period bar number 0, which gives me the start time for bar number 0. Then I'm saying if the previous time is equal to this current time, then I know that I'm in the same bar that I had previously, and I simply return false, so this is not a new bar. If I get to this statement, then I set previous time to be the current time and return true. So I do have a new bar, and I've now saved the start time for the current bar, so the next time I call this function it will return false. And back into the on tick now. Now that I have the stop loss value, I need to apply trailing stops. So the trailing stop needs to be tested on every tick because I'm simply waiting for the price to touch that stop loss value. If the current trade is greater than or equal to 0, then I call the trailing stop function, which we'll write now, passing in the current trade type and the stop loss value. And that's why stop loss is declared here as a static value, because I'm getting the value for bar number 1. I need to test it on every tick, but I don't actually need to call the functions to get the value back on every tick. So I'm just saving resources by calling it once only at a new bar and then using that value each time I have a tick. So now I'll go to the bottom of the code again and I'll write the trailing stop function. So the trailing stop takes two arguments, the order type, and that's passed by reference, and the double stop loss value. I'm passing type by reference because it's coming from this current trade, because I will actually be returning a -1 if I successfully close the trade because of the trailing stop, and that will effectively reset current trade to -1, so I don't have a current trade open. So in the trailing stop function then, if the type is an order type buy, first I need the closing price, and that's the bid price. I get that with symbol info double, symbol and symbol underscore bid. If the bid price is less than or equal to the stop loss price, then I need to close all of the buy trades. And I call that close all function, which we'll see in a moment again. And that returns an order type, which will also be a -1 if this is successful. So I say type equals close all. So if I'm able to close everything, then type will become -1. If not, close all will return order type buy, and so type will still be a buy type. If type was originally passed in as a sell, I'm doing the same things, but then I'm using the ask price with symbol underscore ask here, and I'm testing if ask is greater than or equal to the stop loss value. And I still call close all, but this time with order type sell. And now that close all function So the close all function returns a position type, which will be -1 if this is successful. It accepts an argument, which is position type, and that's the type that we're trying to close. And if close all is not successful, it will return this as the return value. I initialize a return value, position type result equals -1. I'm looping through the trades for int I equals positions total -1. While I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus, so I'm looping backwards through the trades. I get the ticket number first, ulong ticket equals position get ticket for position I. If that is unsuccessful, then ticket will come back as a 0. So I'm saying if ticket is equal to 0, result equals type. So I was unable to get back one of the positions. I know it existed because I've been looping through all positions. Something's happened and I haven't been able to retrieve it. I don't know why, but it might be a trade that I need to close. So by setting result equals type, that effectively says that close all was unsuccessful. And then continue, which will loop back to the beginning of this loop statement. If I get to this point, then I was able to retrieve a valid ticket number, and that position has been loaded into memory. So then using the position info object from above, position info.symbol is equal to the chart symbol, and position info.magic is equal to the input magic number, and position info.position type is equal to the type passed in. Then I know this is one of the trades that I want to close. I call trade.positionClose with that ticket number. That returns a Boolean. So I have this not. So if not trade position close, then just as before, result equals type, which effectively says that I was unable to close something. And eventually when I get to the end of the loop, I just return result. So if everything in the loop has been successful, result will still have the initial value of -1. If anything has failed, then result will have this type value. So the close all function will return -1 if successful, or the type that was passed in if it's not successful. So everything up to this trailing stop needs to be processed on every tick, but after that I only need to process on new bars because this is where I open new trades. So I'm testing that new bar variable again, and this is why I set up the variable rather than simply calling the new bar function here, because I can only call that function once and get true for each bar. If I'd called the function here, then it would be false when I came here. So I set up the value in this new bar variable, and then I can test it in two places. So if this is not a new bar, then I just return. Also, and this is not mentioned in the strategy that I could see, but I'm assuming that if there is a current trade that's open, I should not open another trade. So I'm saying here, if current trade is greater than or equal to 0, buy and sell are greater than or equal to 0, then return. And now if I'm down to this point, I need to get the additional values that I'm going to test for opening trades. I needed the stop loss for every tick, so that's why I've declared that and captured the value here. But to save resources, I'm only capturing the rest of the values if I get here because they're only used if I have a new bar. So there are a number of values that I need here. Let's go through them one by one. First is the confirmation value. I get all of these in the same way that I did with the stop loss, with the copy buffer. In this case, I'm passing the handle confirmation. Still buffer number 0 because it's a moving average again, only has one buffer, number 0, beginning at position 0 and 2 bars. All that's coming back into the indicator buffer. And again, testing if the result is less than 2, so I didn't get enough values back in the same error message. So once I have that, then double confirmation is equal to indicator buffer 1. So that gives me the confirmation moving average for bar number 1. Resistance is a little bit different because I actually want more than one value. I want the results for bar number 1 and 2. Still using copy buffer, handle to the supertrend, buffer number 0, which is the buffer for the resistance line, beginning at position 0, but in this case I want 3 bars back. And so I'm testing if the result is less than 3. And then I can get PPS resistance 1 and PPS resistance 2 from indicator buffer 1 and 2. And then I do the same for the support. In this case, still using handle supertrend, but buffer number 1 is the support buffer. Beginning at 0, 3 bars. If it's less than 3, that's a failure. And PPS support 1 is equal to indicator buffer 1, and support 2 is buffer number 2. And then I just need the close price from the last bar. Last close equals I close, symbol, period, comma, 1. And now I need to decide if I need to place a long entry or a short entry. But first, there's something else that wasn't specifically mentioned in the strategy that I could see. In the commentary for the strategy, he says that the last close price must be above the stop loss price and above the confirmation. In the examples, the stop loss is also above the confirmation, but it's not stated. So if I strictly followed what's stated in the strategy, then the stop loss could be below the confirmation as long as the last close price is above both. But because all the examples showed the stop loss being above the confirmation, I've written the condition like so: if the stop loss is greater than confirmation and last close is greater than stop loss. If you wanted to more strictly follow what was said as the strategy, then you can use this line, which is just if last close is greater than stop loss and last close is greater than confirmation. After that, I'm testing the support line. If support 1 is not equal to empty value, so support 1 is the bar that's just closed, and if that's not an empty value, then it means I have a support line, and if support 2 is an empty value or is equal to empty value, then I did not have a support line there, and that means I've just flipped from resistance to support. And so with the moving averages aligned and I've just started support, then current trade equals open trade, order type buy, and stop loss. And we'll have a look at the open trade in a moment, but I'll just write the short side of this as well. On the short side, the code's very similar, but here, if the stop loss is less than confirmation and last close is less than stop loss, and I've included the alternate code here if you wanted to use that. If PPS resistance 1 is not equal to empty value and resistance 2 is equal to empty value, so the same as before, but in this case the resistance variables instead of the support variables. And if that's all true, then current trade equals open trade, order type sell, and stop loss. So the open trade function takes an order type, and if it's successful, it will return that order type, which will then go into current trade, which I then use to determine that I have a trade open. If open trade fails, it will return a -1, which means that I don't have a trade open. So now I'll go to the bottom of the code and write the open trade function. So the open trade function takes an order type, and a stop loss value and returns a position type. First I need the open price, so double price is equal to, if the type is equal to order type buy, then the price is going to be the symbol ask from symbol info double, and if it's not an order type buy, then the open price will be the symbol bid value. So it gives me the ask or the bid price. Then I use the trade object again to open the position. So if trade.position_open, trade.position_open is a boolean. Trade.position_open passing the symbol, the type, that's this order type here, volume from the input, the price, the stop loss that was passed in here, 0 for the take profit, and the trade comment. Now the magic number, remember, is set once at the beginning of the code. So trade.position_open will open a position at the current market price specified here, allowing for slippage, and return a boolean. If that's successful, then I can return, and here I'm casting the type that was passed in into an enum position type. Position type buy and order type buy are the same value, and position type sell and order type sell are the same value in terms of integers. And that's why I can simply use this casting statement to return the type. And if that's not true, then I won't have called this return statement. I'll fall through to here and I simply return -1. So if I was unable to open a position, I return -1. And I think that's all of the code. Let me just compile. I've made a mistake here in these close all statements. This should be position type. And these comparisons for type are also position type. And in the trailing stop, this should also be an enum position type. Traders Landing tested this strategy on an Ethereum Bitcoin cross over 100 trades and came up with a result of 184% profit. In my demo accounts, I don't have the Ethereum Bitcoin cross available, and I also don't have a lot of history in some of the other cryptos, so I'm going to run my demonstration on US 30 on a 30-minute chart, which I think also matches the chart that Traders Landing was using, but I don't know which date range that he used. So I'm simply choosing to run for the full year of 2021, from 1st of January up until 1st of January 22. I'm going to be using all of the default settings, and I'll just let this run through to the end, and then we can look at the results. So it looks like over that year we had some profits in the beginning of the year and then a gradual decline through to the end of the year. Now that's not to say that this strategy wouldn't be successful with a different symbol, and if you choose the market conditions correctly, then it might be very beneficial. But certainly this test doesn't match the 184% profit. If we just look at the results here, that was a history quality of 99%, a gross loss of $403, and a gross profit of $341 for a net loss of $61.67. So not a great result. But I'll also point out that backtest results can be misleading, and I've often found that the backtest results show a worse result than you would get in a real life. So perhaps you would want to set this up on a demo account and do forward testing rather than backtesting. You also have all of the code now, so you may want to test this on other symbols and other timeframes. So until the next video, thank you for watching.